for a meeting of it. Anybody here from Donegal? That was in Crook Park on Sunday. Anybody here from Mayo? Next year. Nou, tá mé fuir buic, Dave se go leor, mar seans a thug sibh se domsa bheith cans litse an achtar is. Tá mé fuir buic we're Updaráin, agus the Bancéria, agus the Clan, agus the Guinea Eile I go over our museum and Gortamore. This project is over Ultak Tabak Asian. I want to thank President Leahy and this wonderful university for inviting me back again. I usually don't get invited back the second time to places. And for the very, very warm welcome that you all have extended to me. And I have to say, talking to Professor Leahy and his wife and Lynn and Carla and his son Robert, who came down we travelled down by helicopter from the Clinton Global Initiative. Interesting enough, that the driver of the helicopter was from Dublin. So, small world. But it was just gripping the enthusiasm and the commitment to this entire museum project. And not just about telling the story about Gortamore, which is a hugely important story that needs to be told, but also, as the President said, to show the Irish visual arts, to show how that part of our arts is on par with anything anywhere else in the world. So I'm just delighted to be here and to be playing a small role in the opening of museum in Gortamore, Ireland's Great Hunger Museum. And I think it's a very invaluable new addition, very, very significant to the efforts of academics and historians and others to tell and to understand the history of Ireland, and particularly the tragedy of Gortamore. And the Gortamore, for those of you Gan Gaeilge, is the Great Hunger. And it was one of the darkest periods in our history and one of the most defining points in the shaping of modern Ireland and also of the diaspora. So I want to commend everyone who's involved in creating this amazing and impressive project. I think in terms of the educational and informative aspect of it, it is all the time necessary to provide the social and political context. And you can only understand history if you understand it in its time. Now, obviously, we have the benefit of hindsight, and we have, we can look at things much more clearly. But to understand it, we have to put ourselves in that period. And I think it's also important to reflect upon the catastrophic consequences that decisions taken by the government in London had for the people of the island of Ireland. The last time I came here, I saw the unique artworks, and I'm going to have a visit tomorrow morning, so I'm looking forward to that because there has been so much added to it. It's quite small but very unique, but now it has been enlarged hugely, and I look forward to seeing all of the new additions, including work by my very good friend Robert Balla. But as I say to people everywhere I address them, whether it's about last week in Belfast or 200 years ago, you cannot understand it unless you set it in the context of the English invasion of Ireland and the colonisation, and more recently the partition of our island. That's the only way you can understand us as a people. If you miss that, you miss everything. And then Gortamore is no different. There was a dependency on the potato. There was the system of land distribution and control by English landlords. There was the growth of the population and the British government's response to the potato blight. And all of these were the outworkings in themselves, very directly, a consequence of the outworkings of colonisation. And Gortimore witnessed a huge growth in the number of men and women and children fleeing to America and Canada. But the Irish of that period, the famine Irish, were not a new wave of immigrants. Emigration to North America had begun in the 1700s. Some were Irish Catholics fleeing the penal laws, which denied them the right to practice their religion, as well as imposing serious economic restrictions, draconian restrictions on their ability to work and to make a living. Others were Irish Presbyterians, who also faced discrimination because they did not belong to the English or England's established church. And some of them went on to become presidents of this United States of America and played a leadership role in the American Revolution. And then there was a great rebellion of 1978 back in Ireland, when the men and women of the Society of the United Irishmen struck for civil rights, religious emancipation and independence and freedom. And they lost. And they also were inspired by the American Revolution and also by the French Revolution. Afterwards, many of them fled, here to the USA, others to Canada, and some to Australia. And Gortimore raised immigration to a new level. What had been an average of 5,000 Irish people leaving each year swelled to hundreds of thousands. One source has established that in the last 300 years, around 7 million Irish citizens sailed to America. 7 million. That's greater than the population of the island at this time. It's a huge number. It's huge given the size of our island, and it's huge as a percentage of American society. And it's a measure of the desperate poverty that most people lived in, and of their religious and political repression that was the norm at that time. In the early 1840s, the population of Ireland was over 8 million. Over 6 million of these lived in rural Ireland. They were tied in a desperate battle with the land to produce enough for their families to live on. And most families had half an acre, and they were totally dependent on the potato. When the blight struck in 1845, the effect was immediate. By the end of 1846, 100,000 people had crossed the Atlantic. And today, I was at the Clinton Global Initiative for the last few days with my friend Richard McCauley, and we were dealing with economic and social and other difficulties across the globe, but also with the issue of famine. And we've all seen, I'm sure you've seen it, we've watched it in Ireland, scenes on our television screens, most recently in the Sahel region of North Africa, in Somalia, and in years past in Ethiopia. And you have all witnessed emaciated mothers holding tiny, little, underweight babies with distended stomachs and glazed eyes, babies that are sometimes too weak even to cry. And you've seen the big camps where people travel for miles, perhaps as many as 60, 70, 80, 100 miles, to overcrowded and often poorly resourced refugee camps. And mothers and fathers frantically trying to save their own lives and those of their children. Imagine it happening here. We would do that, all of us. That's what happened in Ireland. It's said that people were found dead with their mouths green with the grass that they were trying to get nourishment from. And those who could left. They abandoned what were mostly one-roomed mud or turf-walled cabins, which had sods for a roof and these small parcels of land. And they embarked on ships, many of which would have carried African slaves just a few decades before. And the Irish Quarterly records the pathetic lines of people on Dublin quays. Any of you who visit Dublin or who know Dublin, down at the Customs House, and there's a very, I'm now, as John said, I'm a Choctadala, and I travel along the quays every morning on the way to Leinster House, and I pass the Famine Memorial. The Ronan Gillespie, I think, was the sculptor. Very striking, stark images of skeletal figures. And the Irish Quarterly of that time said, a procession fraught with the most striking and most melancholic interest went in its painful and mournful way along the whole line of the river to where the beautiful pile of the Custom House is distinguishable in the far distance, towering among the mass of the shipping. Melancholy, most melancholy, is the sight to the eye not only of the Dublin citizen or resident, but to the eye of every Irishman who is worthy to be so called, and indeed the spectacle is one of sadness and foreboding. A long, continuous procession, a stream of men, women and children with their humble baggage who are hurrying to quit forever their native land. And these lines would often stretch for a mile and a half along the Liffey. The famine ships left their own legacy. These coffin ships, and they were so called because of the numbers who died on board or who died when they reached the New World in fever camps. The journey from Ireland to Canada or to America took 4 weeks, some cases twice as long as that. It's estimated that 5,000 ships crisscrossed the Atlantic in those 6 years. They came in all shapes and sizes, and in the quality of their crews and the treatment of their passengers. The Jeannie Johnson, it's a replica of the Jeannie Johnson, is now docked at the Custom House just beside that famine memorial. And it uniquely never lost one person on board. It was run by a very philanthropic group of a family, and they never lost one person. So imagine here, some of you travel back home if you're from Ireland, and I'll be back, God spares me, tomorrow to watch Galway beat Kilkenny on Sunday. But imagine, these ships were 60 feet long. I don't know what size this room is, but 60 foot is very small. And you would have maybe 20 foot wide. And visit the Jeannie Johnson if you haven't done so. It's an exact replica of the famine ship of that name. And people were fraught, people were distressed, people were stressed, people were hungry, and these small fragile vessels were to carry you below decks in most cases, and some of the conditions were very brutal across this huge ocean, never to come back. Never to come back. You've all heard about the American wake. And there's a beautiful, I spend as much time as I can in Donegal. And there's a beautiful, in Barnamuckish, the Muckish Gap, there's a bridge, just a small stone bridge across a stream, a mountain stream. It's called Droghad Najora, the Bridge of Tears. Because the custom was that people would have a wake for the young person who was leaving, and they'd have music and crack and stories and so on. And then the family walked them as far as this bridge. And that's the last they saw of them. So it's called the Bridge of Tears. And then the children walked on. So imagine it was your kids. When your kids go to college or go to live somewhere else, but imagine you're never going to see them ever again. 50 emigrant ships, 50 coffin ships sank during that period. 4 of them after hitting icebergs, and there's always an interesting story. There's one ship called the Hannah was quite remarkable because many of the crew and the passengers scrambled on board the iceberg, and the ship went down. That was in 1849 in April, and 129 of them were saved the next day by another ship which was passing. And then there was fever, there was dysentery, there was typhus. And a man called Dr. George Douglas, who was in charge of the quarantine centre on Groseal. Interesting story about Groseal. You know, Irish America is very powerful, and sometimes Irish America doesn't know just how powerful it is. But the Irish in Canada were you know, they weren't as organised, they weren't as prolific in both in commerce, the labour movement, politics, and so on and so forth. But there was a plan in recent times to turn Groseal into a national park, and it became a lightning rod for Irish Canada, or for the Canadian Irish, who successfully campaigned to prevent it because there were so many people from Ireland who had died in the quarantine camp there. And it's 30 miles east of Quinnipiac, and this man, Dr. George Douglas, recorded his experiences. The first ship to arrive there was called the Syria. It had 241 passengers. 9 died at sea, and 1 more, a little girl, 4-year-old, called Ellen Kane. She died on arrival and was the first victim on Groseal. And almost 200 were admitted to the centre with typhus. Within 2 weeks of the establishment of the quarantine camp, he had 850 passengers in the hospital, this good doctor. There were 500 more awaiting admission on board ships, and a further 13,000 on another 36 ships waiting to be inspected. So just imagine that now, that, you know, of all of that, 36 ships arrived into New York Harbour, and with 13,000 people on them. Imagine 500 people waiting for admission into the hospital, and 850 people in the hospital. And the Virginius, a ship from Liverpool, was typical of what happened. It started with 476 passengers, 158 died on the journey, and another 106 had the fever. And Douglas wrote, "The few that were able to come on deck were ghastly yellow, unshaven, hollow-cheeked, and without exception the worst-looking passengers I had ever seen. Not more than 6 or 8 were really healthy and able to exert themselves." And these fever camps extended the entire east coast of the US as well as Canada. And it's important to understand, as we look back on this period, why Irish people distinguish between the use of the word famine and the term an gorta mór, the great hunger, because in a famine there's no food. In Ireland there was plenty of food, but not for the majority of its citizens. And the little booklet I was just glancing at that the university has created to mark the museum actually has a list of the food that was available in it, and it's a longer list than I have here. But for example, the quaysides of Limerick, each day for the 6 years were lined with produce for export, including pork, oats, eggs, sides of ham and beef. And one Limerick merchant recorded the exports leaving his port from June 1846 to May 1847, Black 47. These included 386,909 barrels of oats, and 46,288 barrels of wheat. So the reality of this is appalling. And it was aptly described by George Bernard Shaw in one of his plays, Man and Superman. And one character in the play, Malone, says, "My father died of starvation in Ireland in Black 47. Maybe you've heard of it." And another character, Violet, says, "The famine." And Malone says, "No, the starvation. When a country is full of food and exporting it, there can be no famine." The Great Hunger saw the Irish scatter around the world. A few years ago, myself and Richard Macaulay and the late Siobhan O'Hanlon visited Robben Island. And Robben Island, as you may know, was where the ANC prisoners and most famously Nelson Mandela was imprisoned. And we went there to unveil a memorial to the 10 hunger strikers who died in 1981 in the H blocks of Longcash. And the memorial is in the actual yard that Nelson Mandela used to exercise in. And I was rather curious, and I went outside the prison just to look around me. And up on the wall of the prison there was a little street sign, and it said Irish Town. Now, Robben Island is now a World Heritage Site, and it's run by former prison officers and former prisoners. So I said to one of the guys that was showing us around, "That says Irish Town." And he said, "Yeah," he says, we discovered, because the prisoners weren't allowed to go to the part of the island that they could see Johannesburg and see South Africa from. Some things stay the same all over the world. So they usually went to the other side. And they were sent out to clear up this very, very heavy growth of foliage. And they discovered a graveyard. And they discovered this huge Celtic cross. And all the names were Murphys and Savages and O'Hagans and Kellys and so on. So they brought us down to look at this. And apparently what happened was that when the ships were going to Australia, some of the passengers absconded because the ship pulled in there to take water on board to get across the Indian Ocean. And this little Irish settlement grew up just at the very, very tip of Africa on Robben Island. So it's just quite amazing, you know, wherever you go, you come across Irish people, and very amazing for us. The greatest numbers came here. The greatest numbers came to the USA. Even a lot of those who went to Canada came south into the USA. And they came here to make a new life for themselves. It was called on Innuit, the new island. And, you know, it's now a way of life. I spent the summer doing, with others, Martin Ferris and other, Catherine O'Reilly, other Oireachtas members, a tour of rural Ireland, went into the rural communities and listening to people who were affected by the recession. And it was there that I got a real insight into the effects of emigration. Because in a town or a city it can be disguised. But when a football club can't field a full team because 18 of its players are in Australia, you know, or its young women are off in Birmingham or Brisbane, or a whole generation of GAA players just thrown to the wind in a rural area, it can't be disguised. And, you know, last year, 60,000 young people left Ireland. It's reckoned by this time next year, another 60,000, and the connections are quite amazing. We were up in Leitrim, and this guy who was a small builder, and obviously the construction industry's collapsed in Ireland, and he was running a boarding house and so on and so forth. But the day that we were there, he was telling me he was packing a container to come back to the Bronx for work, and it was as if he was just going to the next parish. He was so familiar with it. And, you know, for someone who never really left Ireland until President Clinton gave me a visa, it's just the connectedness between the most remote part, the most rugged, wild remote part of Ireland and different parts of the United States of America, the NASC or the connection is palpable. And of course the Irish have contributed hugely to the building of this United States, and they also haven't forgot their homeland right from the very beginning. And many, if you want to trace the Irish Republican content in Irish America, the diaspora played a leading role. I mean, the Fenian movement, the IRB, was founded here. The big event in our most recent history in terms of national independence, the 1916 Rising, like a watershed event in our time, which changed the course of Irish history. Key to it was the Irish in America. It's said that the Rising was funded by the children of the family. And the proclamation singles out having patiently perfected our discipline. This is proclaiming a republic, which we still haven't got yet, but proclaiming the republic, having patiently perfected our discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she, Ireland, now seizes that moment, and supported by our exiled children in America. But relying on the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory. And, if you're interested in following any of this up, the papers of J.J. McGarrity are really, I think they're produced by Amble Press, but I'm sure they're available. See Christine Kennelly here in the audience, I'm sure she could point you towards it. Really insightful into that period from 1913 right through until the 1930s. And Sean Cronin, the late Sean Cronin, has written extensively on this Irish Republican story here in the USA. And the support was crucial to what was going on at that time, and it's been crucial in more recent times. In the 1970s, Irish America supported oppressed communities in the north. Many children were brought here, many Project Children and other schemes. Many of you opened your doors and your homes up to children from the north to provide relief from the reality of conflict and occupation. And in the 1980s, Irish America was in the front line in the efforts to end structured political and religious discrimination back home in the north with the Bride Principles campaign, and also a legion of justice issues from the Birmingham 6 to Guildford 4, anti-internment, the use of plastic bullets, the H-blocks and Armagh prison protests. And I suppose it was really with the development of the peace process that Irish America in our time and the rest of the diaspora throughout the globe really came into your own. And the decision by Bill Clinton to become involved was down to the efforts of people here. I see Rich Lawler here in the audience as well, people like Rich and many, many more who worked hard over long, long times. And lobbying by Irish America saw Bill Clinton, before he became president, commit to playing a more active role to achieve a full and lasting settlement of the conflict in Ireland if he was elected. And he committed his presidency to the appointment of a special US envoy to the north because, as he said, he believed this could be a catalyst in the effort to secure a lasting peace. And I often say this, just in terms not just of Ireland or struggle or political campaigning or activism, but just in terms of life. If you want proof that one person can make a difference, here's the proof. Because many of us, on many issues in our own personal lives or in what we want to see in the world, will say, I think it would be a good idea to do such and such a thing. But we never do it, Or many times we don't do it. But somebody had this great idea. Somebody was sitting and said to somebody else, I think we should ask these presidential candidates, would they commit to help in Ireland? Somebody had that idea. And then they went and did it. And then the rest, famously, is history. Up to that point, and what you did was you changed US foreign policy. Because up until that point, successive governments here, successive administrations here acquiesced to the British. Just acquiesced to the notion that the British said about every issue, that this was an internal matter for the government of the United Kingdom. Butt out, it's none of your business, this is an internal matter. And that was changed. And the 92 election, the Irish Americans for Clinton became Americans for a New Irish Agenda, and they went back and pressed the White House to implement the election promises, and in fairness, Bill Clinton did just that. The British tried to persuade him. They did so very publicly. The media were told by British government spokespersons in London that its priority would be to get this notion of a special envoy scrapped. But, as I've said, Irish America persevered. The President kept to what he committed to. And in '94, I was invited by the National Committee on Foreign Policy, headed up by my good friend Bill Flynn, to speak at a conference in New York. And that created a major political storm. The Unionists refused to attend. I remember, just for those of you who are old enough, at that time, myself and Martin McGuinness and others who had been elected for ages as MPs, we were barred from going to England. And I used to joke that when we were coming to America, we had to fly around England to get here. But we also couldn't be, our voices couldn't be broadcast on the British media. And the America media were just gobsmacked by this idea and ridiculed it so much that within a very short time, the British changed it. They got rid of the broadcasting ban. And the decision to grant the visa, and it was a relatively small thing to do, but hugely symbolically important. The British embassy here and the British establishment worked round the clock against it and claimed it would be a diplomatic catastrophe. And the mobilisation here, I'm sure people who were around in those days will remember it. I got a 48-hour visa to visit New York. I was restricted to New York, and the backlash back in London was quite hysterical. The Daily Telegraph said it was the worst rift since Suez. I thought they were talking about somebody else. But Conor O'Cleary has written a very fine book now about this. It's a book worth, it's an inside account from the people here of what happened. But all the other initiatives, like the appointment of Senator George Mitchell, a whole range of US special envoys, all of whom had a very positive role and were significant and important players in the peace process. So that's what works. Censoring, excluding, closing down, repressing, doesn't work. Opening up, dialogue, listening, works. Works in our own lives and works in these conflict situations. So, out of that came the Good Friday Agreement. And since then, because, as George Mitchell said famously to us, after we got the agreement, he said, that's the easy bit. Implementing the agreement is the hard bit. So we've been at it ever since. We've been led by Martin McGuinness in the north. As John says, I have now shifted to Dublin. And, we do our best. We're about that historic mission to unite orange and green, to make peace with the unionist section. of people to continue to build alliances for peace and justice, and for just that sense of equality, of real equality that's needed everywhere in the world. And over that period, Irish America again has remained a constant source of support. Now, the broad media, I suppose many people think it's over and everything's sorted and so on. It isn't sorted. There's still work to be done, and there's still a need to keep engaged, and there's still a need to keep the White House engaged. And we had a series of conferences here in New York and San Francisco. We have resolutions going through cities and towns across the states, and states as well, and they're all evidence of the powerful potential here. And what we have to do is to harness that potential. Ireland is still partitioned. The border's practically invisible, but it's still partitioned, and it's a great light on our lives that is the case. So we need people here to continue to be focused. We need people here to, who might be Irish or who might have any great interest in Ireland, particularly policymakers on Capitol Hill. It's in the US strategic interest to have Ireland united. It's clearly in the interest of this wonderful United States of America to be supportive of that objective. So we do need people here to use their influence with the administration, but also to use their influence with the British and with the Unionists. And the main responsibility of persuading the Unionists obviously lies with us who live there, but building confidence, getting rid of myths, getting rid of ignorance, tearing down fears, creating new opportunities. That's a task for everyone who wants peace and justice and freedom in Ireland. The government have put together a constitutional convention. They have agreed reluctantly that the issue of Irish passport holders having votes in Irish presidential elections should be on the agenda for that. Americans living abroad can vote for your president. The French can do the same. All sorts of societies, particularly republics, can do the same. So why can't Irish passport holders have a vote in a presidential election back home? So there's lots to be done. But I have to say I'm very optimistic. I'm not silly. I'm not stupid. But, well, maybe I'm a wee bit stupid. I'm thrown. But I am very optimistic about the future. And the big lesson out of the period of Gortamore is that we're no mean people. A lesser people would have crumbled. A lesser people would have gone under. And we haven't done that. And it's testimony to the durability of the human spirit that that's the case. Theobald Wolfe once wrote that the weight of English influence in the government of this country, Ireland, is so great as to require a cordial union among the people of Ireland to maintain that balance which is essential to the preservation of our liberties and the extension of our commerce. So not only is it the proper thing, the moral thing, the right thing, it's also good social and economic sense that we should have control of our own affairs, that we would work as a people, as an island people together to keep our people there, unless they voluntarily want to go, but no one should be forced to go. And that's our starting point, a new union, a cordial union between all the people of Ireland, where people can live as equal citizens in a new Ireland. And I believe that that can be achieved. I believe that we can build reconciliation and a new partnership so that we can have happiness and peace and prosperity, and that we can have a new republic, a genuine republic, and it just makes so much sense. And we need your support for that. So I want to thank you for the support that you have given in the past. I would like to invite you, if you haven't been involved, to become involved in whatever way you want in the future. I want to thank the university for the great honour of being here on this unique unique evening, and I want to wish you all the best for the future. And Quinnipiac and Ta Livsha, Banaki, Gia Disha. The very, very best of good luck to you all. Thank you very much.